Ash rained from the sky like burning snow the night young Arkan ran beside his father, their feet slapping wet stone as Mount Merapi awakened without warning. Although the village was familiar by day, it became a maze at night, swallowed in darkness and lit only by a cracked lantern swinging wildly in his father's trembling hand. The flame flickered and stuttered in the ash-choked wind, like hope fighting to stay alive. Meanwhile, the ground shuddered beneath them, loosening stones from walls and sending sparks skittering across the road as villagers screamed and scattered in every direction. And yet, for a few heartbeats, Arkan believed his father's grip could hold the whole world together. He clung to those calloused fingers while the mountain roared louder, while roofs rattled, and while the air thickened into something he could barely swallow. However, the chaos did not move like a straight line. It snapped. A sudden blast of heat and ash tore through the street, and in that violent gust, Arkan's small fingers slipped from his father's grasp. The lantern hit the ground, shattered, and the flame died instantly. So, the world went strangely silent inside Arkan's head, even though the mountain's screams still tore the night apart. He blinked hard, eyes burning, and through the storm of ash he saw only his father's silhouette, dark and steady for one last moment before it dissolved into the rushing orange haze. Then the darkness swallowed everything. Adult Arkan's voice echoes softly. "That was the night I learned that mountains speak before they scream." 20 years later, Arkan walks Merapi's slopes with the quiet confidence of someone who has memorized every breath of the land. At 28, he is a local guide, a keeper of stories, and the last guardian of his father's fading wisdom. Consequently, people in the village whisper his nickname with equal respect and curiosity, the Volcano Whisperer. They say it half as a joke, but also half as a prayer, because some jokes are the only way a community dares to speak about fear. Above him, Merapi exhales thin ribbons of smoke that rise and fall like the steady rhythm of a sleeping giant's lungs. At the same time, black birds spiral overhead in slow, deliberate circles, as if tracing warnings across the sky. Arkan pauses to watch them, because their patterns are never random, not here. If the birds tighten their circles, the old hunters say the mountain's mood is tightening too. At night, Arkan still hears his father's final words in fragments, carried through dreams by the same wind that once brought ash. Lately, though, those dreams feel less like memories and more like messages. For example, subtle tremors now hum beneath the soil at odd hours, and the scent of sulfur has grown sharper, like metal warming near a fire. Even when the village laughs and cooks and argues like any other day, Arkan feels the mountain listening back. Therefore, before heading home each evening, he checks the emergency pack he always carries: radio, flashlight, spare batteries, mask, water, a little food wrapped tight, and a scarf to cover his mouth if the air turns gritty. It is a habit born from loss, but it is also a promise to the future. Because Merapi never murmurs without meaning, and preparedness buys time when time is the first thing disaster steals. Then, one morning, the village's quiet rhythm shifts as a university research team arrives at the foothills, hauling crates of seismic instruments and monitors that blink like watchful eyes. Their leader, Dr. Maya, steps forward, sharp-eyed, steady-voiced, and unmistakably rational. Still, there's a softness behind her curiosity, as if she respects the mountain, even while she measures it. She greets Arkan with a polite nod and immediately scans the ridgelines for the best sensor placements, already thinking in angles, depth, and data. As the team installs equipment, driving metal spikes into earth that once held Arkan's childhood footsteps, the first sparks of tension rise. The scientists trust clean graphs and calibrated numbers. In contrast, Arkan trusts the murmurs in the ground, the behavior of animals, and the warnings passed down through generations. Neither side is careless, they simply speak different languages to the same danger. So, when Arkan quietly warns of irregular breathing rhythms, heat shifting in pockets, tremors too subtle to feel like earthquakes but too steady to ignore, Dr. Maya checks her tablet. "Your instincts are impressive," she says carefully, "but our readings show low to moderate activity, nothing alarming." Her tone is respectful, and yet the words land like a closed door. A gust of wind rattles the thin wooden footbridge between them. It shakes gently, just enough to feel, not enough to break, like a perfect metaphor for their uneasy trust. Arkan watches the smoke above Merapi pulse unevenly, and anxiety tightens in his chest. The scientists walk away satisfied. However, Arkan walks away unsettled, because in his bones the mountain does not feel calm. Moreover, Arkan's unease drags up an old memory, a lesson carved into the quiet evenings he once shared with his father on these slopes. As a boy, he followed him through forests where even footsteps seemed to speak. When deer suddenly ran downhill, his father would stop and listen. "They feel the mountain's heartbeat before we do," he'd whisper, as if loud words might offend the earth. Warm winds were another sign. If they rose too fast, it meant heat was moving where it shouldn't. Ash, too, carried messages, its bitterness, its grit, its changing smell. But the lesson that stayed the longest was silence. "When the forest goes quiet," his father murmured, "the spirits are drumming below. That is when you prepare." And preparation in their home was never a vague idea. His father drew evacuation routes on parchment, simple, precise lines beginning at their doorstep. He'd insist, "Always know your way out before you ever need it." Those teachings return now, echoing through Arkan's bones as Merapi stirs again. The first sign comes quietly, too quietly. A line of monkeys descends the slope in frantic disorder, chattering as if chased by an invisible predator. Shortly afterwards, the black birds that usually circle Merapi vanish from the sky, leaving a blank space that feels louder than sound. Arkan watches the empty air and feels his throat tighten, because absence can be a warning too. By late afternoon, faint rumbles echo at strange hours like muffled knocks from beneath the ground. The air grows warmer and heavier, tasting faintly metallic. Small puffs of ash drift lazily from Merapi's peak, subtle, almost gentle, and yet unsettling precisely because they look harmless. As a result, villagers begin approaching Arkan in clusters outside shops and at water taps. "Is it time to worry?" one asks. "Should we prepare?" says another. "Tell us what the mountain is saying," an elder insists, his voice steadier than his eyes. Arkan tries to keep his voice calm, nevertheless, anxiety threads through every word. His instincts scream caution, yet the instruments in the research tent blink steadily, stable, restless, but not yet screaming. Dr. Maya reassures the crowd with careful certainty, though her eyes flicker with a question she does not say out loud. And over the entire village, a visual metaphor seems to settle. A thick rope stretched taut between tradition and technology, tightening with every tremor, every warm gust, every unanswered question. Night comes, and with it the kind of darkness that feels packed and heavy. Then the dream returns without mercy. Arkan bolts upright, drenched in sweat, hearing the echoes of the night he lost his father. The same roar, the same trembling ground, the same desperate grasp slipping away. Except this time, when he sits up, the tremor isn't only inside his memory. The floor vibrates beneath his feet in a pattern he recognizes instantly. It's the same rhythm, the same breath before the scream. So, Arkan runs to the research tent, where screens glow calm blues and greens, and the scientists speak in numbers that sound too peaceful. "We need to warn the village," he urges, voice tight. "Now!" Dr. Maya studies the data, hesitating as if hesitation could hold the mountain still. "Arkan, our readings aren't showing escalation. There's no evidence to support evacuation." Arkan kneels and places his palm on the soil, feeling its trembling pulse like a living thing. His voice breaks anyway. "Data didn't save my father. Listening almost did." At that moment, the old lantern he carries, restored from the shattered memory of that night, seems to glow brighter. The light quivers in sync with the trembling earth. The scientists stare, unsure whether it's coincidence, faulty fuel, or omen.
But Arkan doesn't wait for certainty, because certainty is a luxury disasters rarely grant. The first flash slices across the sky, an unnatural orange tearing through the darkness like a curtain set ablaze. A thunderous roar follows, deep and monstrous, shaking homes and hearts alike. Merapi has awakened. Its fiery glow spills down the slopes and paints terrified faces in harsh light as villagers rush into the streets, shouting names and clutching children. A column of ash erupts upward, spiraling into a massive tower streaked with volcanic lightning. The ground quivers violently. Now, the research monitors finally agree with Arkan's bones. Alarms blare frantic red, and seismic lines spike off the charts. Dr. Maya's face pales as understanding slams into her. "Arkan, you were right," she says softly. Panic spreads fast, faster than ash.
Because fear makes people run in the wrong direction. Some grab possessions, some freeze, some scatter, calling for relatives through the roar. But Arkan steps forward, lifting his father's lantern, its flame burning brighter than it has in years. "Everyone, follow me," he shouts. "Stay together." Behind him, a colossal wave of ash rises. Its shape, cast by firelight, looks like a monstrous shadow stretching across the land, threatening to swallow the village whole. It is the symbol of their greatest fear, and yet Arkan's voice cuts through it, steady and commanding. "This way, move now, cover your nose and mouth, use cloth, use masks, keep low and keep moving." In that instant, belief, memory, and urgency collide into a single choice: to listen and act. The mountain has roared, therefore survival depends on what they do next, not on what they wish had happened earlier. Arkan leads the group along narrow evacuation paths his father once traced by lantern light. The routes, etched into his memory since childhood, avoid the river valleys where hot ash and debris can race like water. He guides people away from unstable slopes and toward higher ground, counting heads aloud so no one disappears into the dark. Although the ash stings their eyes and coats their shoulders, the simple discipline of moving together keeps the crowd from fracturing. Meanwhile, Dr. Maya and her team pivot from debate to action. They deploy drones that buzz into the smoky sky, scanning shifting terrain and feeding real-time maps to their tablets. "The eastern ridge is unstable. Redirect them west," she calls, voice loud over the roar. Arkan adjusts immediately, because in emergencies, pride is useless and speed is mercy. In that way, intuition and modern insight finally lock together like two hands forming one grip. Then, a scream pierces the air. A child has separated from the group. For a second, the old nightmare tries to seize Arkan's chest. However, he forces himself to breathe and runs toward the sound, remembering his father's teachings. He looks at the trees, noting which ones bend away from the heat and which ones tremble as if something rushes behind them. "Follow what leans away from danger," he whispers, not as magic, but as observation. Within moments, he finds the child crouched behind a fallen basket, eyes wide and face gray with ash. Arkan lifts him onto his back, wraps a cloth over the child's mouth, and runs him back to the moving line of villagers. When they rejoin the group, Dr. Maya marks the location on her tablet and radios her team to keep the route clear. Consequently, the rescue becomes not just a moment of bravery, but a lesson. Evacuation plans only work if communities practice staying together, and if someone is assigned to check that no one is left behind. By the time they reach higher ground, the village is united at last, guided by folklore's wisdom and science's precision. They survive not because one worldview defeated the other, but because both finally cooperated. And as the ash cloud rolls over the empty streets below, a quiet reminder settles over the group like the first calm after a storm. Knowing your evacuation route, preparing a go bag, and responding early can save your life. Dawn breaks slowly, turning the ash-covered world silver. The eruption quiets from a scream to a distant growl, and for the first time in hours, the air is still enough to hear people breathing. When roll call ends, the truth lands with overwhelming relief. No one died. There are tears, then laughter that sounds like crying, and then a long silence that feels like gratitude. Dr. Maya approaches Arkan, her face smudged with ash and humility. "You were right. Your father's wisdom, your signs, we need them." Then, after a pause, she adds, "And we need to teach them clearly before the next time." So she asks Arkan to help design a new early warning education program for the community. Together, they begin weaving a system that blends seismic science, ancestral observation, and local symbols into messages everyone can understand. Sirens and radio alerts, yes, but also community drills, simple posters, school lessons, and stories that show what to do before panic arrives. Because data can detect patterns, and tradition can notice the subtle changes people live with daily. When combined, they create warning that is both accurate and trusted. By weekend, Arkan stands before the villagers, appointed leader of the Listening to Merapi initiative. In his hands, the old lantern flickers, not frantic now, but steady. Its warm flame becomes a promise. Preparedness will be practiced, evacuation routes will be known, and warnings, whether from instruments or from the living mountain, will be respected.